Hello, this is ATA Talking Textiles, and this episode is brought to you by the Emerging Technologies Division of the Advanced Textiles Association. The goal of this podcast is to get to know the wide variety of positions and markets that make the advanced textiles world run. We will be talking to professionals in different roles throughout this series to help inspire the next generation of textile professionals and anyone interested in learning about others' journeys in the world of textiles. ATA offers advanced textiles content throughout the year, including the upcoming Smart Fabric Summit, an event where government, industry, and academia meet, happening April 11th and 12th, 2023, at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. For more information on this conference, please visit www.smartfabricsummit.com. On today's episode, we'll be speaking with George Sun, CEO of Nextiles. We'll learn about his path into the industry and his achievements. And now, let's talk textiles. Welcome, everyone, to Talking Textiles. I'm Paige Mullis, Chair of the Emerging Textiles Division Advisory Board and Brand Director for Glen Raven. I'm also your host for today's discussion and want to thank everyone for listening in on today's episode. For this episode, we are interviewing George Sun of Nextiles. George is a trained computer scientist, electrical engineer, and company founder. He uses his skills in materials and electrical engineering to develop next-generation fabric-based technologies at Nextiles. George, welcome to the ATA Talking Textiles podcast.
Thank you for having me, Paige.
Nextiles is such a cool name for an organization. And a lot of folks out there that are listening today may not know of your company. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what Nextiles does?
Nextiles, it's a play on words. It's basically the new generation of textiles. So really the base case of what this company does is mainly work in materials. We deal with fabrics, we deal with yarns, sometimes we deal with plastics, but the premise of this company is really to take material science to the next level. And when we say next level, it's more about applied and functional applications. And so when we look at fabrics to yarns to textiles, how can we make those textiles work for the human, as in become sensors, become wearables? And so on a scientific level, we build new materials, mainly in fabrics. And as a company, we provide value to our customers in giving them wearable products that have these fabrics measure their body and measure their motion. So at the end of the day, we're really much a materials plus a wearables company.
Very cool. So many things are getting digitized these days, and textiles are such a natural part of our life anyway. So it makes sense to have that be the next step for where textiles is going. So your background, I think, is in computer science, right? So how did you take computer science background and say, oh, I want to apply this to textiles? How did that happen?
Yeah, I definitely need to elaborate on it a little bit more. So as an undergraduate, I went to UC Berkeley. My degree was in two things. It was in electrical engineering and computer science. And so what that meant was not only was I coding and programming, I was also building the things you were coding. So I was building the chips, building the computers, building the electronics. I'm pretty sure that you'll have a question about my academic history, but what happened after Berkeley, after my undergraduate career, was I was very, very interested in new ways to code things. So rather than coding bits on a computer, can you code different materials? Can you code textiles and fabrics to be intelligent? Can you actually program a t-shirt to do X, Y, Z versus putting an iPad on your chest? So I think to elaborate on my background was I was very much a theorist. I was definitely a scientist. I was working in a lab, but inspiration came out of that to say, hey, I don't want to just always program a computer. How can we program other materials that are more closer to the human body? And that's what moved me towards material science. And so study all about fabrics, study all about textiles. And yeah, that led me to Nextiles, where we actually do program fabrics to measure human motion.
Okay. So I have a question for people that may not think about advanced textiles in the way that you're working in that space. What would you say is, you have a regular textile over here, right? Like what you wear, what you sit on, what's in your car, what's around you on a regular basis. And then you have Nextiles or computer aided textiles. What is that component in your product that makes it different from a regular textile?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess in my mind, if it's okay to paraphrase that question, is we have conventional textiles and we have textiles that we as a company, Nextiles, is trying to produce, which is smart. And those, I'm doing air quotes, because smart has so many definitions. I mean, we have wearables that are smart, we have tables that are smart, we have fridges that are smart. So it's kind of a catch-all term, but to elaborate why we are building the smart version of textiles is I do need to boil down the chemistry and the materials a little bit more. The reason why I fancied or pursued textiles was because I really enjoy the form factor and how we make textiles. It's very variable. You can construct a whole slew of textiles. The machinery to build textiles is extremely mature. I mean, almost 2,000 years old. But the one thing that's missing is the conductive materials you would find in electronics. So electronics, they're hard, they're bulky, they're heavy. But the reason why the current industry has revolutionized around electronics is because it's extremely smart, they're extremely fast, they do all these crazy computations, and it's because they actually have different chemistries. They use things like copper, they use things like carbon to gold to aluminum. They use the metals to power the intelligence. And when I was looking through my PhD and my academic career, was the only thing that textiles today are missing are those chemistries. We can still use polyester, we can still use nylon, but to make them smart is to actually use those materials into the textile. So I know that was a lot of jargon, but what we do here is we actually make conductive textiles. We have textiles that are either wrapped or made from conductive materials. So not only do you have your normal polyester cotton yarns, we actually have them and they're weaved or embedded with conductive materials like silver, stainless steel, and copper. And that's the difference, is because they use different chemistries and they allow us to interact with the textiles much like a computer, much like sending in voltages, sending in currents, and quite frankly, toggling that ones and zeros you normally hear in computers.
I totally could nerd out with you on this, but we have some other questions to
Sure.
get through. So, but that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. Now, I've heard you talk about your academic career, so to speak, in terms of your path and education. I hear you have a PhD. I heard you mention that. You've got, if there's some kids out there listening, some people in school that maybe not be kids, do you have to have a PhD to get into the field that you're in?
I would say no. I mean, for those who are academically inclined, those who want to expand their knowledge, please pursue a master's, pursue a PhD. Actually, even just go to a vocational school or community college. I highly advocate that academic journey. But for you to be part of the textile community, for you to be interactive and a member of this fabric global workspace that we have, I think you can just get started immediately. As in, whether you're in middle school, high school, whenever, you can start to learn how to sew. You can start to learn about the different varieties of fabric. You don't need to read, crazy manuals or textbooks to operate a machine. And it's because what I love about this industry, it's very hands-on. There's a lot of theory if you want to learn about it, but it's very hands-on to say, hey, this is a fabric that can work. I like the stretchability of this material. How can I combine this fabric with another fabric, or use a machine to add this to that? And so it's a very hands-on industry. I would even say to those who are listening that you should get started as soon as you can. I learned how to sew in my late 20s. I kind of wished I learned how to sew when I was in my teens. I should have stopped asking my mom to sew my buttons. I could have kind of done that on my own. And to answer the question directly of why I did my PhD is in a way I was ignorant. I didn't know what was out there. So my PhD was an opportunity to ask more questions rather than to learn a lot. So I asked questions like, why can't we do this? Why can't I add conductive materials to fabrics? And so I had that time to ask questions and to learn more and to realize there was a bigger landscape ahead. But if you don't have those burning questions and you know what you want to do, I want to build fabrics, I want to create tarps, I want to build infrastructures for furniture or for fashion. If you know what you want to do, I think just getting started, doing an apprenticeship, internship really, or just even shadowing a mill or a factory is definitely a good start.
Okay, that's great to hear because a PhD, I'll just say it sounds a little intimidating. And so we want to like draw more people into the industry. And I know different people fashion different ways of learning. So that's helpful to hear. Thank you for sharing that. So I know you are the founder of Nextiles and you've talked about your background, but maybe could you talk about for people, and I'll just put myself in that role. I'm not a computer scientist, but I'm so interested in smart textiles. What are some of the other positions that are in your company that help the company move forward every day? Not everybody, meaning not everybody at your company is a computer scientist, perhaps, right? So what other types of ways could students get involved or look at careers in the smart fabrics space that may not necessarily be building and the computer science aspect of the production?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I need to paraphrase the question myself is, aside from either a daunting PhD or figuring out the ones and zeros in a fabric, what are other aspects of the company that we work on and we work on, full-heartedly, and that is actually to further optimize our existing technologies and infrastructure. So that again, that sounds very abstract, but really just making conductive fibers is one niche and that'll always be a niche. But if you want to look into how you can mass produce, how you could really optimize the supply chain, and hopefully everyone here can appreciate that the supply chain, it's functional, but it's messy and it requires a lot of communication. So that's another aspect. And another aspect is client engagement. So for those who, I don't like when people say this, but people do say, oh, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at sciences. Well, even if that's the case, you can still grow into a business role, talk to clients, talk to other companies, really bridge that gap between suppliers, because I'm really talking to manufacturers all the way from Taiwan, China, and Korea, and we need to speak the same language. We need to speak the same, values. And that's actually more on the business side. But to kind of move back towards the technology, yes, if you don't want to make or you don't know how to make conductive fibers, you can still further optimize existing tools, as in, what's the best way to stitch this into a new pocket? What's the best way to utilize this machine that helps you bind to new materials? And it's really like, as long as you kind of know the ingredients, you may not specialize in a certain ingredient, but as long as you know the kind of tools to mix those ingredients, I'm kind of talking in cooking analogies. As long as you know like how to use a pot and pan and all the tools to make it work, I think you'll be a good contributor in this field. So what that means is, again, going back to your hands, sewing, knowing different machines, knowing different binders, knowing different ways that these machines are even available in the US. I think what's really cool to me is that although we believe a lot of the manufacturing has left the US, it's some semblance of it is still here. There's a lot in North Carolina. There's definitely a lot in New York. We're based in New York. We actually work in the garment district. There's some in New Jersey. There's some in LA. So there's still pockets that exist in the US, and it's really up to us to resurrect that. And resurrecting meaning let's speak the same language as them. Let's work with their suppliers, and let's really utilize the machines that exist here. So again, very, very hands-on. So
that's super helpful. That's super helpful. And thinking about, I'm going to kind of come back to use your words. I'm going to recap. So what I heard in that was supply chain and sourcing. I think every manufacturing company needs something like that. Optimization and kind of really how that process goes from a concept into manufacturing to scaling. I've heard that. Client engagement. So even if you're not on the sales side, maybe you're on the customer service side, and also the business element of that. So there's a lot of opportunity within your realm, it sounds like, other than knowing the nuances of the science that goes into it. You can work in the periphery and still be a part of it sounds like.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not trying to diminish what my engineering team does, but if all we did was engineering, we might as well just be a researcher at a university. But because we're beyond just pure R&D, we're beyond just asking those questions. We want to be engaged with our community. We want to be engaged in the industry. And yeah, I wouldn't even call them periphery. They're highly complementary. We need to speak the same language. We want to talk to suppliers, vendors, sourcers. And really, that's a huge part of our company.
Every company needs marketing, branding, those other elements too. You talked about what Nextiles does as a company, building conductive materials. What is the market that you guys serve currently?
Yes, I want to level set that all the science that I've been describing is very esoteric. So it's not lost on me that if I went to a consumer, or even if I went to my best friends and I nerded out on these materials, they probably wouldn't care. And so the people that do care are actually really more about, yes, the computer science. They actually care about, you do all this hard work, but what's in it for me? And that is when we do apply computer science onto the material science, as in we make the material smart, they're conductive, and now we're programming them to say, hey, what did you just do? Where are you moving? Is that end value chain of like, we're now measuring things, we're now programming things. It's actually very useful for athletes for now, that our market is in the high-end professional market or professional athlete market. So we do work with the NBA, we work with several MLB teams. We're soon going into soccer and football. We do have some contracts with the military as well. And you can kind of consider them athletes as well, those who are out on the field. And so that being said, we work with high-end performers, high-end athletes, because they're hungry for that data. They're hungry for that computer science knowledge of like, how fast did I move? Who of the team is quote unquote strongest or has the best technique? And you really can't do that with cameras. I mean, there's a limitation to cameras. You should be doing that on body. I think fortunately, no one wants to wear iPhones on their bodies. They rather just wear their uniform. That's where we step in and say, hey, we can make your uniform smart. Let me give you a compression t-shirt. Let me give you compression sleeves or knee sleeves. Let me give you something for the ground, like a force plate or a sock. That's where we come in and says, that's your value. It's comfortability, it's access, and it's the data insights. And those three are enough to make us very competitive in the market.
Great. That's helpful to know, because you can say a conductive material, but then how is it used? So that's great. It's super helpful. And also, I think it opens up yet another facet of what people might be interested in and how they could be drawn into this, especially if it's related to sports or movement, things like that. So you went to school, did all your schooling. Did you work along the way? Did you get out of school and say immediately, I'm going to start this company? Or like, how did you kind of get from school into starting this business?
Yeah, I would say it was an accelerated path. I did school for a long time. Most of my 20s was in school. So yes, I went to UC Berkeley. And then after that, I immediately did my PhD because I really thought I would be more academically oriented. I thought I would teach, be in academia. And so I did my PhD at MIT. So it was kind of good just to move to that coast. And then while I was in the Boston area, I did have the fortuitous chance to work with Puma. And so Puma there, I mean, hopefully people do know Puma. There's the Nikes, Adidas, and Puma, that they recognize some of my work, mainly in the materials, mainly in electronics. And they had me come on board to their team to be their embedded engineer. So I was building things like shoes. I was building shoes, upperwear, and that was fascinating. It was fascinating to see work translate so quickly in industry. You don't want to spend 10 years studying. You want to spend maybe at most a few weeks making a product at these companies. And so that was really informative. That was formative as well to see that like I not only could study, I could also produce. And so therefore around 2018, almost 2019, came back to New York. Actually, I want to say I became an apprentice, but I shadowed and I collaborated with a lot of textile engineers in the garment district. I worked with one of them very, very closely at Nextiles as well. We're still in collaboration. And really ramping up to 2019, to almost to the end of 2019, that's where I started the company, Nextiles, where I thought, hey, given my experience at Puma, how fast they should work and where you want to provide value, learning the sewing industry, the textile industry in New York, the garment district, finally in 2019 began the company in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And the Brooklyn Navy Yard was all about machines. How do you really take the machines that exist in Brooklyn and revitalize the manufacturing space? After 2019, I think we all know, or maybe we just kind of forgot about it because it was so harsh, but 2020 came in and there was some reorganization, but let's just say we're still here and we're thriving. So from 2019 to 2020 and now we've been doing very well.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great to hear. Another topic, and you touched on this a little bit, so I'm going to dig a little bit more. There are students out there that are looking for internships. You called it shadowing, but like, do you have any advice for students that need to get some experience, the best way to kind of go about doing that, or share maybe how you approach that? Because I think people want to know, it's hard to get experience without experience, right? So
yeah,
maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a catch-22, and I need to remind myself that it is rude of me to even say, oh, I need 10 years of experience, when to get those 10 years, you must get started in the first place. And so it's this weird oxymoron where a lot of companies are requesting experience, but for those who are coming in, how do they start? And for me, it's, I would say this: school is great. Please continue school. But those who are in school currently should still be proactive. Maybe over the weekends, intern. During the summer break, find an opportunity to just be behind someone and look through their way of life. I tell my team this a lot. I tell myself this, that even like just working in a service job is eye-opening. Working as a cashier, working as anything that's in the industry is eye-opening, because you learn about client engagement, you learn about speed, you learn about like timelines and demands. So even if it's not in textiles, you're still learning the soft skills of like, hey, there's deadlines. I need to work with 3 other people, and some of them, hopefully you like them, but some of them you not like. And so those soft skills are actually very formative. And I think you can do that in parallel in school and claim that you have them, because as we do employ, as an employer, I'm actually looking more for the soft skills of, can you communicate? Can you be on time? I would even say like being on time for meetings, even though that should be taken for granted. Some people are just bad at that, and you don't want to be that type of person. So I would say for the technical side, you can probably learn that on your own. Open a textbook, see a YouTube video, shadow someone. But those soft skills, you can't learn that unless you just get dumped in the deep end. And so if you're actually looking for more technical internships, I can't really give you that great of advice. I just say, like, just pass your resume around. Don't be shy. You may get something unpaid. You may want to do an internship, but it all adds up. And I think it takes a little bit of tenacity to just keep it up. But you'll eventually get there, I think.
Awesome. Okay, just a couple more questions for you, and then I think we'll probably wrap it up here. But ATA, Advanced Textiles Association, is there anything that you can share in terms of maybe how being a part of that organization has benefited you, or interacting with people within that group? Is there anything that you can share related to the ATA, Advanced Textiles Association?
Yeah, I would say without ATA, I thought I would be alone. I kid you not, I'm not trying to sound cheesy, but through my career, which I guess it sounds unique, that I thought I was the only one in this industry. I swear, I thought me coming to, I worked in Puma, so I was in Germany, moved back to New York. I thought I was the only one trying to do this. And I'm not, because looking at ATA, there's so many other smart people out there, so many interesting companies that are out there. The clientele is huge. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, for ATA, it's a great networking environment. It's a good area to bounce ideas off of and to meet people. This sounds cheesy as well, but even meeting you, I would never have done that unless through ATA. So these opportunities just pop up just by asking the right questions, engaging with different partners through ATA. Just even have a list of companies that are out there that you're now aware of is super helpful to know. And so overall, maybe I can break it down to points. One is just exposure. I now know who's out there and who to ask questions to. Because before, when I had questions on things that were not my expertise, like plastics or like a certain machine that does this, I would have wasted so much time on Google, like really. But because of ATA, they're there in front of you. Email them, email their customer support, or visit them in person. You can definitely do that here. The second is a shared knowledge space. It kind of goes to the first, but I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, it's out there. Most solutions are out there. And then the third, selfishly, is just exposure to myself. I can go to other companies and say, hey, I can work with you. I can be your partner. I can go on podcasts. I can give out talks and network more. So I think through all of that, it's learning for me. Hopefully other people can learn from me. And just being a member of a community, which I hopefully grows in the US, because for me, a huge goal for me is to not see the jobs go overseas. It's really to empower and further optimize what's existing in the US. And luckily, I'm in one of the bigger cities that does it, like New York, but they do exist in North Carolina. They do exist in the other states. And to see those grow from a community like ATA is just really empowering.
Okay, you guys listening out there, you heard it from George. Get involved, connect where you can, show up. A lot of life, if you just show up, you never know what you're going to get out of the experience. So, and ATA has been great, likewise for me as well. So thank you for speaking to that. So if you could do anything, what is your vision if you didn't have to think about money or any type of constraints? What is your vision for smart textiles? Like, what would you see would be in an ideal world? How would you like to see smart textiles?
Absolutely. I can only give you an analogy right now. The analogy is, again, this comes from my academic history, that I studied silicon, I studied semiconductors for years, and that was the electronic world. And they created, well, we see it now, the biggest industry around that. Apple is one of them, Microsoft is another one of them. All the tech industries are built around conductive materials, really just like computer chips. And we see that now, but it was a progression of about 60 to 80 years. People call it the Silicon Revolution. That when the first transistors was made at Intel and IBM, now we see it in our phones and our computers. To see that happen in textiles would be phenomenal. To see that it's not just mills that we never hear about, they're now big companies that people respect, would be amazing. So again, when I go out there and I'm seeing, I'm buying an HP computer, I'm buying a Dell computer, I'm buying a MacBook Pro, I would like to have people have that same verbiage when it comes to clothing. I'm buying a Nextiles t-shirt, I'm buying a Nextiles powered uniform. To have a respected community and industry revolve around textiles would be amazing. That it's an analogy to the technology industry. So again, people buy, I buy a Samsung phone, I buy an iPhone, I buy the iPhone 14. No one says that in clothing, it's fast fashion. People are like, I just buy it from H&M. But I would really advocate that we push that narrative to be more respectful. We're more empowering. That it's not just, I wear this for a week. It's like, that's Nextiles tech. I really need to wear that. And to do that is to grow the company. I mean, it's to, again, engage with the community, engage through ATA, and build the infrastructure to do that. So going back to suppliers, vendors, and really empowering the technology today to do that. So that would be my more philosophical answer behind that.
I love it. And I think that's what gets me excited about ATA, emerging textiles, working and collaborating with people like you, because that is a great dream. It will become a reality. I have no doubt you will be one of those to make that happen. So thanks for putting it out there for everybody to think for the future. Okay, this is my last question. So is there anything that you wish you knew when you were starting off, and I'll say ... in the textile industry, but it could be textile, but it also could just be when you were starting off in the professional world?
It hasn't been a while. It's only been a few years. I've been at Nextiles or in this community for about like 4 years now, maybe going to 5 years now. What I would change would be, I think, I guess I only have analogies or just weird anecdotes, but it's kind of barking up the right tree is what I'm trying to say. Is like, I think having questions are great. You should have questions. You should have curiosity. You should build hypotheses like, if I did this, what would happen? But knowing who to ask is super important. I remember I was asking colleagues that were like me. And so what that meant, I was talking to other scientists, I was talking to other computer scientists as well, and they almost gave the same answer I would. And so it's kind of a weird echo chamber that's actually not helpful, because you kind of go down the wrong hole. Like it's like you have a hammer and you're just trying to find nails to hit, and everyone's telling you what nails to hit, but they kind of sound like you. So it's not that great of feedback. And so what I would change is really identifying the right people to ask. I know that sounds impossible, because like, how would you know what you don't know? But I remember just even forming my team. I work with a colleague, or he's our chief business officer, John Peters. We have a phenomenal chief financial officer, Matt Evans, and they're not like me, right? They are scientists in their own right, but they're not the type of scientists that I am. They're business oriented, financially oriented, and they sometimes produce better answers than I do, because they're not so blinded by their own expertise. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is ask questions, but ask them to people outside your comfort zone. I mean, I ask questions from designers to textile engineers to computer scientists, and they give crazy responses, but it's kind of up to me to pick the right nuggets of information. So hopefully I'm not making that too abstract, but I guess what I'm trying to say is have a lot of questions, develop your hypotheses, but then ask more than one person, because I spent really 2 years down the wrong hole. And it wasn't until I met the right people, asked the right questions, that like literally within 6 months, we accelerated and really went on the better direction.
Yeah. Okay, great. No, that makes total sense. And I think that if you're with like-minded people, you're always going to get kind of the same information out, and innovation comes from a diversity of perspectives coming together. So I think that makes total sense. So, well, thank you so much, George. It was great talking to you today. I'm going to send this to every college student I know so they can listen and hear from you. So it was great information. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of ATA Talking Textiles, brought to you by the Emerging Technologies Division. ATA is a not-for-profit association representing the international specialty fabrics marketplace. Learn more about events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.